What's up, guys? Welcome to my shop. Today I'm going to be showing you how I make a flawless 18 gauge castellated bezel. This is the process here of casting and getting everything poured out and rolled ready to go into the final stone wrapped in a beautiful thick bezel. So to begin, I'm going to be casting the bezel in 999 silver. That's pure silver. It's softer than sterling, easier to work with. I'm just going to pour it into a ingot mold here in the half round shape. And once you take that through the rolling mill, it just gives you a quick and easy rectangle shape, the general shape to start with, to start scoring out and planning out this bezel here. You just got to soften and anneal first, get this ready for the rolling mill. Here's the first few passes of the rolling mill. Just getting a basic rectangle shape out to get your bezel cut out of. So probably 10 to 12 passes here to get it to about an 18 gauge thickness. So here I'm checking what side is a little more straight than the other, just to get a straight edge. Here on this coarse no bastard file, I'm just gonna get me a nice straight edge to score off of. So I check in 17, it's a little wobbly in 17. But the 18, you see, doesn't fit. By the end, I'll have it filed down just where it barely falls into 18. Here I'm just getting my rough estimate of the length of the bezel here, easier to work with. Measuring the stone to get my height of the bezel correct. It came out to about 5 millimeters, basically just making a perfect rectangle. Using the divider tool to space out the castellations on the bezel to be cut. So here I'm taking a pre-made scallop bezel just to get my outside diameter. It's like 28 gauge thick pre-made bezel, super soft and easy to get me a measurement here for my final length on the 18 gauge bezel. So just give me a line on the thinner bezel, and what's going to happen is when you transfer it over to a thicker bezel, the inside diameter is going to be shorter than that pre-made stuff, but all the stamping work is going to stretch the bezel out. With the divider tool here, I'm just marking off the rest of the castellations at about 1 millimeter each, and then using a T-square to mark out each of the individual castellations to be stamped.
Can you see my lips?
So here I'm using about a 35-degree angle, just a straight line stamp that I made out of an old file. I'm just going through over the score marks, stamping, getting ready for the second round of stamping. But each of these is going to be the castellations in the end. By now the silver's been worked enough. The silver is hardening back up. So here's soften it again. You can see my mark, my scoring still to cut. So now this stamp here is a bit more of an obtuse angle. It's probably, I don't know, a 60-degree, 65-degree angle. It's a little wider than the first one, so it really gives some depth to it once you cut. And just soften it one more time because that second round of stamping's hardened it back up. Scoring my line again to cut. Making sure everything's straight. Getting a perfect 90-degree angle all around. It's really soft still, so I can just push along the side of the stone. A little bit of force with the 18 gauge, it's so thick. But with some pliers, you can pretty much shape it around any shaped stone. So here I'm just trying to line up two valleys perfectly, so that when I make my final cut here, I can file in close enough and get those valleys to fall into each other and just make the bezel joint disappear. Filing the ends of the bezel here to make a perfect seam so they line up and almost disappear once they're soldered together. You can really get these bezel joints to disappear. So 75 solder, your first round of soldering always is 75, so just a tiny chip of 75 and clean that solder joint out just a little bit. Get rid of any overflow. Here I'm just filing out the solder joint, just making that valley look like it did originally. Now I'm beveling the bezel here to make a smooth transition into the stone And I'm going to check and see how close I'm getting on the inside edge and go back and do a little bit more filing, get it lined up perfect 90. So each of the castellations, you're going to take a number 3 saw blade here. That's about the widest one I use. And that gives a good gap between each one, so when they close in, they don't touch each other once the castellations are closed on the stone. My bench pin, you see I have cut kind of modified to hold it for me. Need something to hold the bezel up for you. And now I've got the bezel all finished, soldered, filed, smooth transition on the edges, and that's how you make a perfect flawless bezel.